Okay, so topic of today's presentation is virtual interviewing. And what I'd like to do with today's presentation is, first of all, start out and talk a little bit about the services that Career Services offers, and then go into the different types of interviews that you could possibly expect to have in a virtual format. So Beth, I just lost your video. Are you still there with me?
Yep, I'm still here. I
Okay.
just was turning it off out of courtesy to you.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I lost the video, and that's kind of what started the issues on Thursday, was I started losing people's videos, and then we lost their audio as well. So, okay, just want to make sure you were still there. So,
yep.
Cover the different career services that we offer. And then we will go into interviewing. We'll talk about the types of interviews that are possible that you may expect to have. And then we'll go into some tips on actually being successful in the virtual interview. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free either to type in the chat box or just stop me, since it's a small group here, and I can answer those questions for you. So I think we'll get going. Okay, so starting out, a little bit about the services that we offer. Keep in mind that many of these services, even though we're not physically present on campus anymore, we're still offering in a virtual format. So we do resume and cover letter reviews and assistance. So we can schedule appointments either via phone, via email, or via WebEx to review your resume or your cover letter. We also do presentations on resumes and cover letters as well, and we're doing those virtually. We can practice with mock interviews. So after this presentation, if you would like someone to sit down with you and practice questions, practice using the technology that you might expect to have in a virtual interview, we can do that. We definitely can help you with the job search and networking strategies. They've really changed now that we're sort of in the coronavirus age. Companies moving to away from face-to-face and more to that virtual. We can assist you with professional dress. We have both a professional menswear closet and Kate's Closet, which is professional women's wear, available on campus. And so once we get back to a little bit more normal and on campus, you can make use of those. We can help you with your social media presence. And that includes both LinkedIn, your professional presence, but also looking at your personal Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, those accounts, and cleaning those accounts up and making sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Because now we know that employers aren't going to be meeting you face-to-face during interviews, but they're still going to be checking your social media. They're going to be doing those Google searches, and they're going to look and see what they can find out about you online. So you definitely want to have those social media accounts professional and have things out there that you would want a future employer to see. Like I said earlier, we're still doing those presentations to classrooms, student groups, and departments. We have a dining etiquette dinner, which once we get back on campus in the fall is something that we may be doing. It really is kind of up in the air at this point. And then also many online services. So Handshake is an online job posting board, Going Global, which allows students to look at foreign countries if they're thinking about studying abroad or working abroad, or also international students looking at some companies here in the United States that might be favorable to hiring international students. Student Opportunity Center is a platform that has a lot of those scholarly opportunities, conferences, publications, research, more different opportunities, including possibly big interview, which I will talk about in a little bit, and that's more practicing interviewing. So all of those are different opportunities that we have virtually that you can make use of on your own time. Okay, so the different interview types. I'll start off with what we think about for a traditional interview, and that's face-to-face. So that's going to be one-on-one or with a group of people. It may be one interview. It may be more than one interview. You may have a series of interviews spread out over the day. So if you have that face-to-face interview, you just want to be prepared to meet with more than one person. You want to make sure you know what the agenda is for that interview and for that day. Phone interviews are something that have always been used sort of as a screening mechanism, and normally companies or organizations would use those to kind of decide who they would want to bring in for a face-to-face interview. Some companies, maybe ones that aren't using technology as heavily, may be relying primarily on phone interviews now during this sort of virtual time period to do the interviewing. But I think most of them want to get that one-on-one, that visual, so they're probably using some sort of virtual. But if you do have a phone interview, just make sure that you're ready to take that phone call. And if you're not ready to take it, or sometimes they will be ahead on their interviewing, so they'll call you a little bit early. If you're not ready to take that phone call, just let it go to voicemail and then call them back as soon as you're ready to take that call. Another interview type that we're seeing a little bit more, I actually had a student approach me prior to the coronavirus outbreak back in the fall who had a pre-recorded interview, and I helped her with that. It was the first time that I'd ever encountered one of those. But basically what happens in a pre-recorded interview is you're given a set of interview questions, and then you're asked to record yourself answering those questions. And those are usually orchestrated through a platform, maybe Sparkhire, Interview Stream, something like that, where you go in, you ask those questions, and you're recording yourself answering those questions. Sometimes you're allowed to do that multiple times. You can record and erase those answers and then re-record as long as you have those done within a specific amount of time. Other times you have one shot, you answer the questions, you upload them, and that's it. But you want to treat it like any other job interview. So plan professional dress. I'm going to talk in a little bit about having your background set professionally, having distractions minimized, those types of things. You'll still want to make sure that you're following those sort of tips and rules as you're recording your interview answers. And you'll want to take the opportunity, since you know the question ahead of time, you want to practice your answers on those questions. You want to make sure that you're reading and you're following the instructions very carefully. You want to have your login information here. So what I tell everybody is, this interview, you have a great advantage because you know the questions ahead of time. You know what you're going to be asked. But then you also have to consider that everybody else who's doing the interview also knows those questions. So you want to make sure that you're putting the time and the effort ahead to doing your research, to formulating your answers, and to practicing your answers before going in and actually recording. Then the interview type that I really want to kind of focus on today, and that's your video conferencing. It's going to be your real-time it's the replacement for the face-to-face. It's what most companies are utilizing now in doing the interviewing. So also a lot of schools, graduate schools, are also using that in place of a face-to-face interview. So some examples, and please don't think like these are the only examples that organizations are using, but Zoom, WebEx, Skype, Google Hangouts, Meet. It could even be so much if it's a college or university, they'd be using something like Blackboard Collaborate. So any of those sort of video conferencing platforms are kind of fair game to use, and it really depends on what the organization that you're interviewing with, what they choose to use. But the things you want to think about in preparing for that is the same things as you would for face-to-face, but also testing your equipment and your connection ahead of time, making sure you have a strong internet connection, making sure that where you decide to actually do that interview, that you have a strong connection there. If you don't have a strong connection, you might want to think about moving to another spot in your house or in your apartment where you have a better connection. Goes without saying, for almost all interviews, you want to dress appropriately. You want to have things available for you. You want to have water, paper, pen, notes nearby, and have those handy. And then, as I mentioned before, that proper background and the quiet environment. And what we'll do now is we'll go into some of these tips, and we'll talk about some of these things I already mentioned in a little bit more detail. So, tips to ace the virtual interview. And keep in mind that some of these things you could also apply once things get back a little bit more to normal, even for a face-to-face interview. So, one of the things, as I mentioned already, make sure you test your technology. And not only are we talking about testing the platform that you plan to use, but also look at your webcam, make sure your webcam works, make sure your video quality is good. You want to check out your mic and make sure your mic works. You might want to practice recording yourself using your mic just to see how good the audio quality is. And you can actually purchase, if you have enough time ahead of time, a set of headphones with a mic. And it's fine if that makes your audio quality a little bit better to go ahead and do that as well. I know people that do that, and it works for them. You want to make sure, as I said before, that you check your internet. Make sure you have enough bandwidth to run the program they are using. And something else I'll talk about, you want to make sure you're not using Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer does not work well with a lot of the video conferencing software and platforms. So definitely don't use Internet Explorer. We've actually, with people in our office, had issues using Explorer and then being able to open WebEx, Collaborate, any of those video conferencing platforms. You want to prepare your space. So you want to make sure that your background is neutral and appropriate. A bookcase, some pictures on the wall, that's absolutely fine. You just want to make sure that there's nothing behind you in your background that's distracting or that's inappropriate. No inappropriate posters or anything like that that you wouldn't want an employer or someone on the other end of that video to see. You want to make sure that you have your face lit, that the light's at your face or next to you, providing light. You don't want a lot of bright light behind you that's going to sort of drown out your video and make you fade out. So you definitely want to face yourself towards a window, not with a window behind you. You want to minimize distractions. So you want to make sure that you have your TV off, your phone muted, outside noise. You can control that to a certain extent. The best advice I would have is find the most quiet room in your house or in your apartment. But if someone's mowing outside, they're doing construction work outside, there's a thunderstorm going on, there's outside noises that you can't control for, but do the best you can. Other things you want to think about is if you have children, roommates, pets, see if you can kind of keep them in another room while you're doing the interview. We know that that's not always possible, but as much as possible to do that, that's a good idea to do. And then as much as possible, I just had it happen to me earlier, turn off your notifications and stuff on your computer. Some of our notifications, now that we're working online, I'll get those even though I'm doing presentations, and that can be a little bit distracting if you read what people are sending to you in those texts. So just be careful with that. And then the other thing is have your surroundings kind of clean. If you have a desk or a table where you're working, just not real cluttered. A few things there, and I'll talk about some of the appropriate things to have with you in just a few minutes. Okay, talked a little bit about practicing, but see if you can actually practice using the exact technology that they're planning to use. Typically, they'll send a meeting link ahead of time so you'll know what the technology is. See if maybe you can have family or friends get on that technology and practice with you ahead of time. Just using the technology, seeing how it works with your particular computer. You want to practice answering sample questions, but you don't want to memorize answers. Unless you're doing that pre-recorded interview, you're not going to know what the questions are ahead of time. But what you can do is you can anticipate, and I'll talk in a little bit about some of the questions you can anticipate. And if you have some stories or some ideas in your mind that you can draw on to answer some of those common questions, then you can adapt your answers to variations of those questions that you may be asked on. So don't try to say, if they ask you a question, tell me about a time when you failed. Don't have a question memorized in your mind about how to answer, tell me about a time when you failed. But think in your mind, have a story or two about a time when you had a challenging situation, how you handled that challenging situation. Maybe it was a failure, or maybe it was a situation where you didn't do as well on a project at work that you wanted to do, how you sort of addressed that issue and how you did better. Just having those ideas in your mind rather than trying to formulate and have specific answers to questions memorized. And then the more you practice with technology, the more natural it's going to feel. Anytime you're on technology, you have sort of that unnatural, that disconnect feeling, but the more you do it, the more times you do it, the more natural it's going to feel. And then when you have your interview, the more authentic you'll come off in that interview. Here's some practice questions that you might want to think about. These are common questions. Tell me about yourself. I would guarantee 99.9% of the time, you'll have some version of that tell me about yourself question asked in an interview. Why are you interested in the position? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Once again, you're probably going to get some version of that possibly in an interview. I would say that's pretty likely. But think about those stories. Think about stories that highlight your strengths. And also think about those stories that maybe possibly highlight your weaknesses. And then what I always tell people is when they ask you that weakness question, they're not asking you that to say, gotcha, we got you, you have a weakness, you're a bad person. That's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is how self-aware you are of the areas where you can still improve. We know none of us are perfect. How self-aware are you of those areas? But also, how do you work on those areas? What are you doing to improve on those areas and to learn and to get better? Because that's what life is. It's just continuously getting better. And they know when they hire you into a position that you're not going to be 100% up to speed on everything they're hiring you in on. But what they want to see is, okay, how do you work on those areas where you're not 100% and how do you improve? So that's what they're looking for there. Do you have any questions for me? I'll talk about that in just a bit, but you definitely want to have questions prepared for them ahead of time off of the research that you do to ask them. You never want, when they ask you if you have any questions, not to have any questions. And you also want to keep in mind that any interview, and that's virtual, face-to-face, a phone interview, anything, it's a two-way street. They're interviewing you to see if you're a good fit for their position, but you're also interviewing them and seeing if they're a good fit for your career goals and if that position's a good fit for what you want to do. If you think about where you see yourself in 5 years, is that position something that you see as part of your 5-year plan? So those things you want to have in your mind as you're doing an interview. Big Interview, that is our online interviewing practice software. If you go to your My UT account and you go to your student tab, and you go to the Career Services section, there will be a link to Big Interview. Big Interview is really nice because it gives you the opportunity to practice sample questions. You can record yourself answering those questions and watch those back. You can email those to faculty members, to friends and family. You can even email those to members of the Career Services staff, such as myself, with feedback on your answers. Another nice thing about Big Interview is they have sample tests or sample questions banked for different positions and different jobs. So you can search for different questions that you might be expected to have asked to you in an interview for a particular position. So that's a good sort of resource that you can have to go back and practice. And you can do that. You have video practice, so you can practice seeing how you look on camera, what your mannerisms are, and how you come off. So not only is it practicing those questions, but it's also those nonverbal cues. Okay. When you sit down for your virtual interview, you want to be prepared. You want to make sure you've done your research on the company and the position. So a little bit of web research to find out what's the company's mission statement, find out a little bit about the position, make sure you know the job description for the position that you're hiring or that you're interviewing for, and make sure that you think about your experience and your resume and how it relates to that position. As I said before, have those questions prepared ahead of time to ask them. It's totally okay to have notes with you when you sit down. Have a notepad and have some notes written down, questions you want to ask them, and things that you maybe want to keep in mind during the interview that will sort of jog your memory about points that you want to bring up. So that's totally okay. You also want to be able to take notes during the interview. So it's totally okay if you have, if they make a point that is really interesting to you and you want to come back to that, take notes on that. Or if they bring something up that you want to ask a question about later, make notes of that. You always want to have a copy of your resume available in front of you that you can refer to. So if they ask you a question about a particular point on your resume or a particular item in your experience, you can refer back to what you said on your resume and talk about that. And then, as I always said, have water available to drink. I keep a bottle of water next to me all day long, every day, particularly now that we're doing this, this virtual, because I feel like I'm doing more talking now in meetings than what I was doing before. So have water available to drink. Okay, here's some questions that you can ask them. Like I said, this is not even close to an exhaustive list. And a lot of those questions are going to come both from your research and from different things that they bring up during the interview. But some things you could think about: how would you describe the responsibilities of the position? How would you describe a typical day or week in the position? Do you foresee any major developments or projects in the near future? If I'm extending an offer, how soon would you like me to start? I think now, during this time of sort of working remotely and sort of uncertainty, maybe even talking about, and they may offer some guidance with you, is how is the company responding right now? Are they allowing employees to work from home? What is their sort of distance policy, and how are they responding to this particular crisis? And then finally, what is the timeline for the interview process? I always, every interview that I've ever been in on, I ask that question if it's not brought up. The reason I ask that is it really is for me to set my mind at ease. I am sort of a person that tends to worry if I did well in the interview I think we all kind of get anxious after the interview because we want to know, we want to have an answer. And so if you ask that question, it may be that you're the first person that they're interviewing. And they may have 4 or 5 more people to interview. They may have a committee process that goes through, and it may be a few weeks before they will even have a decision to be able to give you an answer. If you ask that question and they tell you that, then that puts your mind at ease. You don't have to worry if you have your interview on Friday and you haven't heard anything by Monday that, oh, well, maybe you did really bad on the interview and they're not going to call you. You know that there's sort of that time gap there that they have to interview other people and make that decision. So nonverbal communication. You want to make sure that you sit straight. You have a comfortable chair or wherever you're sitting to do the interview, that it's a comfortable place where you can sit straight and look directly at the camera. You want to make sure you smile. You come off warm and approachable. We know that in this virtual environment, it's really hard for your true personality to show through. But the more that you can do that and the more warm and approachable you can be, the better. As I said, you want to look at the camera and not the interviewer on the screen. So the camera typically is going to be on the top of your monitor, and your interviewer is going to be directly in front of you. So if you can think about looking at the camera more so than the interviewer, then that's going to allow you to actually make contact, eye contact with the interviewer. You want to make sure that you're engaged with the interviewer at all times and not looking around at your surroundings. So that goes back a little bit to minimizing those distractions and having a quiet place to do your interview. And then obviously, no chewing gum or eating food. That's just, that goes for any interview, but particularly if you're doing a virtual interview. Dress for success. I can't emphasize this enough. Make sure you dress as you would for an in-person interview. You want to check yourself in the mirror, and that's your entire look. That's your makeup, your hairstyle, your smile. Make sure if you had lunch beforehand, there's not food stuck in your teeth. All of those things you want to make sure you check before going into your interview. And I really like to emphasize this doing virtual interviews now, that, you know, most of us are kind of confined to our homes now. We're not getting dressed up and going out to the office or to work as much as we were in the past, if at all. But when you go for your interview, you really want to dress professionally, because that confidence that you're going to bring in your dress, it's going to kind of bleed over to the confidence that you project in your interview. So the more professionally you can dress, the better you're going to perform in that interview. Okay, so some tips for professional attire. And we have here sort of examples of what would be business professional versus business casual. And so for guys, conservative patterns on your tie, conservative colors are things to think about. No earrings, your shirt cuffs showing slightly below your jacket, dark shoes and socks. Probably during a virtual interview, they're not going to see your shoes and socks, but it's always good to kind of look the entire part. And then for ladies, jewelry in moderation, conservative two-piece suit. It could be a skirt or a pantsuit. Knee-length skirt if you're going to skirt, hosiery at or near your skin color, and dark shoes. Now, I'm going to talk about your shoes. I've had a lot of ladies ask me this question, particularly for in-person interviews, but just something to consider. Ladies will ask, does it matter if I do heels or flats? And my response is no, as long as the shoes are dressy, it doesn't matter if the heels are flats. I would never tell someone you would have to wear heels if you're uncomfortable in heels, particularly if it's an interview where you're going to be there most of the day and you're doing a lot of walking. The last thing you want are uncomfortable shoes, because that's just going to affect how you feel and how you present yourself in an interview. Okay, make a connection. We've had a lot of recruiters tell us that they want you to keep your interview answers professional, definitely professional, but they also want to get a glimpse of who you are as an individual. I sort of use a rule 80-20, 90-10. So 80% professional, 90% professional, 20%, 10% that talking about you and who you are as an individual. So it could be a hobby, it could be something you have in common either with the interviewer or the organization, as long as it's appropriate. So I have a picture of a gentleman running here. I'm a runner, and that's just kind of who I am. It's something I've done for a lot of years now. And so when I go into an interview, that's something I bring up when they talk about me, because it's part of who I am. It's part of what I do. I make it sort of a pretty much a daily part of my routine. And so I always bring that up. And usually when I'm in an interview, at least somebody in that interview can identify with that, and I'm making that connection. I've had an employer who's a recruiter bring up the point that when they were in an interview, they talked about really liking to cook, and particularly liking to cook recipes that they found on Pinterest. And she shared with me that she got a position, and this week in the position, on the Friday, they said, well, we're having a potluck or a pitch-in dinner. And she said, well, what would you like me to bring? And they said, just something that you find on Pinterest, one of those recipes that you like to make. And like she said, they had weekly, every Friday, they did these potlucks. And she said, I don't know if me giving that answer helped me get the position. But she said, what I do know is it did her, because it showed that I would fit in really nicely in that organization. So think about that. Think about ways that you could show yourself as an individual and also fitting nicely within the organization outside of just your work skills. And then following up on that, be yourself. Allow your personality to show through as much as possible. Be enthusiastic. Be expressive. All of these things at a virtual, it's a little difficult to do, but if you are one who tends to talk a little bit with the hands, if you've noticed in my presentation, I have talked a little bit with my hands. I've kept it kind of within the box, within my shoulders to my waist. I haven't really been over the top, but that's who I am. And if I sat here very stiff and didn't move my hands the entire time, it would be very robotic for me. And you don't want to come off as robotic. You don't want to come off as stiff. And you don't want to come off as not being authentic. So those are the types of things that you want to think about when you're doing a virtual interview and how you present yourself and how you come off. Follow-up, definitely a thank you email to each person that you interview with within 24 hours. So make sure before you're done with the interview that you have names of everybody that you interviewed with. And if you can possibly get their contact information, their email address, that would be great. So you can follow up with them within 24 hours with that email. You want, if possible, this goes back to taking notes throughout the interview, is if they brought up something that was unique when either when you asked them a question or something that they asked you about or that they mentioned that you felt really rang a bell with you, that made you feel like you were especially qualified for that position or especially good fit for that organization, you want to mention that in that email to them. So if you interview with 3 different people, you want to have kind of 3 different unique emails, one for each of those people, where you mention things that that person said. And you want to be concise. You don't want to make this a paragraph or 2. You don't want to make it an essay. But 3 or 4 sentences, thanking them for their time and consideration, expressing how excited you are about the position, and then talking about something that was unique or something that they mentioned that made you more excited or more confident about the position is a good way to go. And then finally, this is our career services location. Our physical office, when we're on campus, is in the Student Union, room 1533, and that's directly between Starbucks and Bar Rockets. And we have the new career studio. Our contact information is 419-530-4341. We're still checking that voicemail, and so if you have any questions or you need to leave a voicemail, you can do that. But probably the best way to reach us during this time is at our email, which is careerservices@utoledo.edu. And then also make sure that you follow us on social media. And there's our social media at UT Career Services. Thank you for your time. And do you have any questions for me? Beth, make sure to unmute your mic.
Yep. That's the first problem of those things. Thank you, Thomas, for going over this. So I just said if you are sharing resources like a PowerPoint, you have to present on a PowerPoint. Do you have any suggestions of how to make that appealing in the virtual world?
One thing I would suggest, and it's hard for me to do because I'm not a big PowerPoint person. And if you notice when I designed this PowerPoint, I had a picture graphic on every slide. I think if you're asked to present a PowerPoint virtually like this, providing some graphics and some things to hold your reader's attention is really a good way to go. And so typically when I'm presenting in front of a class and I have a PowerPoint, I don't go with a lot of graphics because I'm moving around the room, I'm throwing in stories, I'm doing a lot of different things, and so I don't feel like I need that. Where if you're doing this in a remote location, you have to think that most people who are on the other end, they might have other things going on around them. They may be home, and they may have other distractions. So the more things you can do to hold their attention on your PowerPoint would probably be the better.
Hey, Tom, can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
Hi, Beth. This is Dabble in the Career Services office. I'm actually recording this for a live stream for Instagram. However, I would suggest as well is to make sure, can you see me?
Yeah. Oh, there you are.
I would make sure that you also, all of your wording and text is large enough, just in case that they're not able to maximize their screen or what have you. You don't have too much content on your slides, so it'll make it very difficult for them to read. So I'll just try to be as concise as possible, making sure that your font is large enough so someone could read it just in case there's not a good connection, and go from there. Just making sure they have good visual aids to the things that you're talking about. So if there's graphs, there's pictures that can explain some of the things you're looking for, would be a great thing for you to add to your presentation.
Another thing I'll just throw in there, Gavin makes a great point, is don't always assume that who's looking at that is going to be looking at that on a full-size computer monitor. They may be looking at it on their phone or on a tablet. And so, yeah, definitely keeping the information really on the slide sort of concise and then filling in the details.
Another question I have for you.
Go ahead.
Okay, is in the group interview setting. So if you're in a group web interview, it's a lot of screens going on. What would you suggest how your demeanor should be when somebody else is answering a question?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a good question. I definitely, there's a couple different things. So when you say demeanor, I would definitely be listening to what they're saying. So if I'm assuming you're talking about if you're being interviewed and there's 3 or 4 other people who are also being interviewed at the same time. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So I have actually served, not in the virtual world, but in the real, sort of face-to-face. I've been on a committee where there was 2 of us interviewing a group of 6 people. And so what you want to make sure you're doing in that is that you're paying close attention to what the other people are answering, so that you're not just answering in a vacuum, but that you're incorporating some of what they're saying from their answers into your answer, that you're building on their answers, and that you're also, let's look at it this way, they're going to want to make sure when they're hiring you that you're going to be a good team player. And so if they're bringing you in that sort of environment where there's multiple people interviewing at the same time, they're really looking to see how you interact with the other people. So make sure that when someone gives a good answer, that you affirm that answer and say, yeah, that was a really great answer. But also maybe put your twist on it and add your additional thing to it. When I served on that committee, the thing that was the biggest turnoff was the person that came in there and thought they had all the answers, but then also realized that they were in competition with those people and treated the other people like they were the enemy. They were always trying to one up the other person. You don't want to do that.
I would just add to smile the entire time. Not necessarily a weird death stare at the interviewees, but smile, just making sure that you have a pleasant space, that you're engaged in what's happening, basically verbally, like what Tom is saying, but listening, doing your nonverbal cues as that you're engaged. So the head nod, the smile, exactly. So definitely make sure that they understand that you're listening, that you're engaged in what's happening, and that you're not just kind of like fiddling over here, taking notes and not just not paying attention. So be aware of that.
And that's the worst thing I'll say. I mentioned it in the presentation about having your phone away from you. You definitely, it's so easy to get distracted, particularly if you're like in a meeting where there's multiple other people and you know it's not your turn to talk, just to look down at your phone. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to become distracted by other things just because the question has been directed to you. Another thing I would think, one other thing is, the whole note-taking thing. Make sure as other people are answering questions that you're taking notes of what they're saying.
That's all I have, but I do have one thing to share with you guys.
Sure.
So when Thomas, you said look at the little webcam up here versus their little box. So I played with some of the WebEx things, and there's some tools on here where right now you are directly below my camera. So then I'm looking at you, you're talking to me, and I'm making eye contact with you because I've put your box literally directly below my camera. So I don't know if
that's awesome.
That's it's that little box on WebEx that has blue with little dashes on it going out. And then all the boxes make little boxes, and then you're literally right below my camera, so then I don't have to worry about the eye contact, and I'm already talking to you normally.
Mm-hmm. I know, because that's great, because I know on some of it, and I know it's you up there with me now when I'm looking at you pretty close. But on some of and Collaborate, I think is really bad about this. It puts you bottom, and so you're looking down at who you're talking to, but your camera's up here. It's really awkward.
I agree with that, but I like how WebEx, I just hit the button, and now you're right below my camera.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, we're learning new stuff with all these things every day, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have any other questions?
I do not.
All right, what I would suggest, though, is definitely reach out to me, send me an email. My email is just thomas.avery@utoledo.edu. Just reach out to me if you want to practice interviewing, and we can either do it through Collaborate or we can do it through WebEx and actually do a mock interview using the virtual tools.
Thank you.
No problem. Like I say, any questions, just let me know. And I really appreciate you you popping in and asking really good questions and giving me some tips as well.
No problem.
You have a good evening.
You too.